The Monthly interviews Australian writer and poet David Grant Lloyd, Part 1, Developing a Voice. Yeah, this interview was actually conducted a few months ago, earlier in the year when my book of poetry, Alive in Dubbo, was launched in Sydney. I met another Australian writer, Mark Mordew, and he introduced me to the editor of The Monthly, Gordon Hewitt. And for those of you that don't know The Monthly, aren't familiar with it, I'll leave a link in the description, but they're an organisation in Belfast, Northern Ireland, that promote and provide a platform for various writers, poets, artists, mostly in Northern Ireland, but they're interested in the arts community and the arts sector all over the world. So if you're interested in literature, art, etc., you do well to check out their website. It's really cool. So first he started with asking, how does writing become something you take seriously? And as I told him, that's quite difficult to recall because I always enjoyed creative writing time, like at school, primary school, all of that sort of, creative time, whether it was painting, drawing, but mostly writing. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was the best part of school. You just let the imagination run wild and documenting it. In many ways, it was just a way of filling in time. Once I got into adolescence and high school, etc., I was drawn mostly to poetry, and it was kind of therapeutic for me. Not just writing poetry, but reading it as well. Now, initially, I was drawn to some old American poets like Emily Dickinson, Edgar Allan Poe, and the like. Soon after that, I started to discover other American poets like Raymond Carver and Charles Bukowski. I really loved their poetry and still do. To this day, I keep reading and rereading them over and over. I could relate to them so much. And it wasn't until after school that I actually started to get into Australian poets, strangely enough, like Ray Desmond Jones and Michael Dransfield. Those are among my favourite Australian poets, and it's a shame that a lot of their books are out of print. It'd be difficult to find some of their books, but you might have some luck on eBay or in some second-hand bookshops. It's a real shame that because Ray Desmond Jones and Michael Dransfield were incredible Australian poets, and it's so difficult to find their books these days. But as I said, yeah, go to eBay, check it out, and if you can locate their books, I highly recommend them. And he asked if I got any support at home or at school. There was little bits here and there, but not really. Some teachers would compliment my writing, whether it was an essay or a short story or something like that. Little bits here and there, maybe a little bit from family too, but there wasn't necessarily obvious support or encouragement. It was just sort of one of those things, And he asked about my third level education. I said, yeah, after getting my higher school certificate, I went to Wollongong University and came into contact with Australian writers John Scott and Alan Wern. Incredible writers, those guys, and they had a very profound effect on me and my writing from that point on. He just gives an example of some of my poetry from Alive in Dubbo here, Devil's Hole. What happens then? After I got my bachelor degree, I ended up getting a master degree. I found it difficult to work my way into the world because writing just always stuck with me. It was almost like I wasn't really fit for anything else. So it's been the one constant throughout my whole life. I've had various jobs here and there, obviously, to pay the rent and whatnot. But writing is something that my whole life has always just seemed to revolve around. Writing and reading, obviously, literature itself. As I say here, for a while I tried other careers and lifestyles, etc. But in the end, I think you can't get away from who you are. How did you How did you develop your own style? Yeah, that's developing your own style and, you know, finding your own voice, it takes a very long period of time, a lot of work, a lot of experimenting, trial and error, that sort of thing. As I say here, I often tried a lot of traditional structures like sonnets and villanelles, sestinas, couplets, etc. In the end, I found a lot of those traditional verses to be a little too rigid, and so I've tended to find my voice more in free verse, a very specific kind of free verse, because I think that, yeah, as I say here, the Australian vernacular has a fascinating approach to poetry, because it's a very unique dialect. The Australians, well, all cultures have a very unique dialect, and poetry is a very it's a wonderful format for that kind of dialect to be articulated and poeticized. Are you concerned about being able to travel your material? Yeah, to some extent, as I told him, because it's very localized. There are some references, I think, that some people who aren't familiar with Australian culture and even Australian regional culture would be possibly a little bit confused, and that's a bit unavoidable in some ways. But there's also universality to it as well, because the human condition, as I say here, or as I imply, the human condition, you know, it's something we can all relate to, regardless of what part of the country you're from and what part of the world you're from. So it resonates on some level as well. There's another poem there, Zhang Wei. And that's what brings part 1 of the interview to an end. I'll upload part 2 later on sometime, and just here he provides a link to where you can get Alive in Dubbo. It was Flying Islands, a little an independent publisher outside Newcastle, who published the book, and they publish a lot of really cool poetry books. So you'd be well to check out their website as well. And as I said, I'll leave the links in the description. So yeah, thanks for watching, and yeah, leave a comment if you like, click like, subscription, and cheers. Yeah, as I said, I'll upload part 2 later.